huge recruiting weekend is coming up for Sun Devils football, and I have a feeling we're going to be busy breaking down a lot of news.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. And stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And today we are going to be previewing this upcoming recruiting visit for the weekend, a bunch of official visits, which is why we're talking about this on a whole podcast. Is this isn't just like 5 kids, 6 kids, 7 kids coming in. There are 19 2025 recruits who will be visiting Arizona State University this weekend. 19 recruits, 3 4-stars that are coming in, several high 3-star kids, 4 guys who have already committed to Arizona State for next year's cycle, and 11 recruits with the warm status. We're taking a look at them, and then of course we got to talk about a little more about the holes that these guys fill. I'm going to make some predictions on who will stay, who will go. Well, not who will stay, who will go, but who will commit this weekend. I think it's going to be a busy weekend, like not just from like a, hey, keep an eye on these guys, but I don't know, man. I think we could get 3 or 4 guys to commit this weekend. And we'll preface it with this before we really get into meat and potatoes and whatnot. I have a feeling that the not dead period, but the sanction that was handed down for ASU football, that they can't have any recruits on campus and they can't go out and recruit for 4 weeks. I think that's going to end up being in July, because taking a look at Sun Devil source from 24/7 Sports, which is where I got this, they do have visits on June 7th. There are 9 kids that are coming in. I have a feeling that we're going to be looking at either July itself or probably mid-June to mid-July would be my assumption here, which also makes sense why they're really just getting a ton of these players to come visit the program, take a look, see if they really like what they are being presented and everything. So I'm excited for this weekend. Like I said, I think this is going to be one of those weekends where you get 3 or 4 guys to commit. ASU is not shy, and they're not capable of having those weekends like that. We see it all the time at ASU. We see the big weekends, and it's like Kenny Dillingham will put out on Twitter, like, activate the Valley, and then he'll have one, and it's like, I don't think we're done yet. And it's like, not 1, not 2, not 3. Like, they get really into it, and they get fans excited. They get everybody really invested in the recruiting. And this is another weekend where that could potentially happen. But we'll touch on that a little more towards the end of the podcast. Let me introduce you to the guys who are coming in. Like I said, there are 19 recruits in total that are coming in. We're not going to read off every single one, but there are some that are very noteworthy. First of all, there are 3 4-star recruits coming in. Michael Turner, from my understanding, there's no relation to the former NFL Pro Bowler Michael Turner, but Michael Turner, coming from North Richland Hills in Texas, 4-star running back. Again, I don't know if there's relation between him and Michael Turner from the Chargers and Falcons, but he is the highest rated recruit that will be coming in this weekend. He is the number 184 recruit in the nation, the number 12 running back, and the number 26 recruit in Texas. That's pretty high profile as far as I'm concerned. They are going to have a really good conversation with him about getting him to stay, because ASU in the Kenny Dillingham era has recruited running backs well, and they have really talented running backs on the team. Like you have Cameron Scadaboo, you got the Carlos Brooks. Raleek Brown transfers to the program. But you recruit Kyson Brown last year, really good 3-star running back from Texas. This year, you bring in 4-star running back Jason Brown from O'Day High School out in Washington State. They are good at bringing guys in. They built the room really well. They've recruited the room pretty solid. Right now, looking at Michael Turner's profile, there are no teams that are listed as warm at this point in time. So there's a chance that ASU could make a really good impression on Turner and convince him to commit to the program for 2025. The next 2 4-stars actually have the warm status. The first one here is Vander Plug, a tight end from Fullerton, California, 6'6", 223 pounds. 4-star kid, the number 240 recruit in the nation, the number 13 tight end in the nation, and the number 26 recruit in the state of California. He has a warm designation for Arizona State. And for what it's worth, he's probably looking to stay on the West Coast. His warm status is there's 5 total teams: Arizona State, Cal, SMU, Utah, Washington. He is looking to stay central here. And ASU is obviously a really good situation for him. It's going to be a familiar atmosphere, I guess. That's not the right word, but ASU is a really good spot for these California kids to end up coming to and committing to. ASU has recruited California very well over the last several years, dating back to when Antonio Pierce was the recruiting coordinator for Arizona State under Herm Edwards. They know what they're doing. They know how to get these kids to stay. There's something in the water out here that gets them to think about it. But not even that is the biggest ploy here. The biggest ploy is Jason Mons, who has already brought in 2 4-star tight ends. This year, Jaden Fortier is coming in. You listen to the podcast, you know I'm a big fan of Jaden Fortier. They even have for 2025, AJ Aya is committed to the program, someone who ASU is really, really excited about as the really high 3-star / 4-star tight end that is already committed to Arizona State. You could potentially add another 4-star to that group. And you're talking, looking at 2025, you could have a tight end room of Jaden Fortier, AJ Aya, Vander Plug, and then maybe Marqueston Douglas or one of the other tight ends on the roster decides to come back as well. You could be looking at tight end as becoming one of the stronger rooms on this team. Really exciting. And like I said, the thing that makes me confident you could land Vander Plug is having Jason Mons, who has clearly shown his prowess as a recruiter. Arizona State is putting an emphasis on having pro-style offenses. This is something that Kenny Dillingham has said many a times. This is something that ASU has had a focus on doing under the Dillingham era. Is there's been a lot of emphasis on trying to get to a point where they can recruit kids and say, hey, we're going to get you ready for the next level. We're not going to have these weird looking offenses that are not always translatable. There's a lot of good things that can come out of running a pro style offense. And one of the biggest things is being able to recruit kids to come to the program. Vander Plug, definitely someone that I think could commit maybe this weekend. We'll find out at the end of the podcast. The last 4-star that's worth noting here is Quanell X Farrakhan Jr. I am not 100% if I pronounced the last name correctly. He is a 4-star receiver out of Houston, Texas, 6 foot, 170 pounds. Not ranked nationally, but he is the number 36 wide receiver in the country and the number 43 player in the state of Texas. Also has the warm designation. And this is going to be a little more of a competition. He's got SEC offers, but ASU is in his top 5. Alabama, Arizona State, Colorado, Nebraska, Texas A&M. there is an argument that Arizona State is the lowest of those 5. There's also a really good chance that ASU can get this kid. Because at the end of the day, you look at places like Alabama, Texas A&M, you're like, yeah, they know what they're doing when it comes to recruiting. They should be the favorites. But with Arizona State, this is a program that has done a good job pulling in top-tier wide receiver recruits for the last 10 years. Under Kenny Dillingham, they pulled in Adrian Wilson, and it's not a coincidence that they were able to land Adrian Wilson when Hines Ward became the new wide receivers coach to replace Rashad Samples. That was one of the things he highlighted was a big reason he committed here. And that's one of the reasons you like your chances to land a kid like Quanell to come to Arizona State is having a guy who's seen it all, done it all at the pros, at the next level, at a very high level, someone who's already recruited a very talented player out of Texas at the same position. This is a really good opportunity for ASU to turn their wide receiver position into one of the biggest strengths on the team. ASU has a talented room right now, but there's also a chance that a lot of the guys that are on this team are no longer on the team next year. Jake Smith, Melcon Stovall, Jordan Tyson, Troy O'Mary. 3 of them are in their final year of eligibility with Stovall and O'Mary. I believe Jake Smith is, but for all I know, he could have one more year. I know O'Mary and Stovall are for sure, and a big year from Jordan Tyson could push him to go to the pros. There's an opportunity here for Quanell to be able to step in and have a big-time role, but we'll touch on that a little more here in a moment. Beyond the 4 stars that are coming in, like I said, there are 11 total recruits that have the warm status, including Vanderplug and Quanell Farrakhan. Beyond them, you've got a high 3-star kid in Jaron Martin, edge rusher from El Centro, California. There is also Mark Handy, offensive tackle from Albuquerque. There is Peter Lange, interior lineman from San Francisco. Tavian McNair, wide receiver from Corona, California, someone that I'm going to tell you to keep a really good eye out on him. Another offensive tackle from Dayton, Ohio, Jeremiel Atkins. Wide receiver from Chandler High School, Gio Richardson. Quarterback Cameron Dyer from Albuquerque. And defensive lineman Caden Branston from Liberty High School. Lots of guys to keep an eye out on. Lots of guys that I think could potentially land at Arizona State. But next up on the podcast, we're going to be talking about holes that some of these guys will fill. We'll be focusing on the guys with the warm designation, but there are some very good opportunities for these guys to come in and find immediate playtime. We're going to highlight those in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Passion, drive, patience, the winning formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car and turn it into the MVP to bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Let's go ahead and head into the next part of the podcast as we take a look at potential holes that these incoming recruits will fill. And I think we can pick up our conversation with the wide receiver room. Again, you have a really fun looking room because you've got some savvy veterans, but you've also got some young guys that I'm really excited about. Caleb Black and Corbin Hendricks are at the top of that list. They are redshirt freshmen. They're guys who do a little bit of a little bit of, I wouldn't say everything, but they press different buttons for you. Corbin Hendricks, big kid at 6'3", 6'4". Caleb Black, a smaller kid at 5'9", 5'10", but someone who's really quick and can run all sorts of routes. They're going to continue to develop. They're going to be guys that are going to be working hard, be in the lab. They're now going to be under Hines Ward, figuring that out. But you might be losing your top 4 receivers. O'Mary, Stovall do not have eligibility. Jake Smith, I think, is done. He could have 1 more year. And Jordan Tyson should have 3 more years of eligibility as a redshirt sophomore. But he could also end up leaving for the pros if he has a big year, like I believe he can. Nothing is guaranteed with Jordan Tyson returning to the program. If you lose your top 4 receivers, you're going to be looking at a very young room. Of course, they'll be attacking the transfer portal. That's clearly some of the bread and butter of this program. But you also have to be reliant on your recruiting classes at some point. And I think that 2025 is going to be one of the most telling years for Arizona State to turn this roster into a young, a young team, a young program that has their own homegrown talents. Corbin Hendricks, Caleb Black, I think will be very big parts of that. Adrian Wilson is going to be a very big part of that. Zachariah Sample, the lone recruit from this year's cycle, could be a big part of that as well. Adrian Wilson for next year's cycle, there's a chance he could be your wide receiver 1, depending on how everything shakes out. But there's also kids for next year. Again, the 4-star kid, Quanell Farrakhan from Houston, Texas, could also step into this situation if he did decide to commit to Arizona State. He's not the only wide receiver who's coming in this weekend. The guy who I will be keeping the closest attention to will be Gio Richardson out of Chandler, Arizona. There's also Tavian McNair out of Corona, California, another guy that I'll be paying attention to. There's a chance that ASU is going to be pulling in a lot of receivers for this upcoming cycle. And it's worth noting because Hines Ward is first year as a collegiate head coach and having a big time recruiting emphasis on him. He could end up bringing in 2, 3, 4 guys in this recruiting cycle. It's going to be pivotal that ASU finds a way to be successful when they're building for the future. Part of that is going to be having a strong receiver room. But there's also some guys that ASU is going to be wanting to keep home. They have 4 commits right now from their 2025 cycle that are visiting. The biggest name is Michael Tollefson, better known as Butter Tollefson, quarterback from Tustin, California, the first commit that ASU landed a year ago. Quarterback, he's listed as a 3-star quarterback from 24/7. He's a 3-star / 4-star, depending on your outlet where you're looking at. He could be the future of the position. We're going to find out this year what Sam Levitt looks like. We're going to find out whether or not ASU is confident in him or if they're going to be looking at outside resources through the transfer portal or their upcoming recruiting class. And Tollefson, who's the second recruited quarterback after Jaden Rashada was in the 2023 cycle, it's going to be an open competition. No matter what Sam Levitt does, I mean, unless he wins a Heisman Trophy, Tollefson has an opportunity to come in here and be QB1 for this team. And that's one of the biggest holes that you could potentially be filling here right now, would be quarterback. Again, it depends on how things shake out with Sam Levitt, but Tollefson has been committed for a year. There's a very good chance that he will stay committed to ASU, come down and compete. The other 3 commits for you are all defensive backs. Joseph Smith from Spring, Texas, Dejon Hinton from Scottsdale, Arizona, and Xavier Scarown from Texas City, Texas. A corner, a safety, a corner. there is going to be tons of competition at corner. It was that way last year. It's that way this year. It's going to be that way again next year. Brian Carrington knows what he's doing when it comes to recruiting that position. They brought in some very talented players. They're going to continue to bring in talented players. But when it comes to the secondary, you can never have too many guys. And again, this is going to be a Sun Devils team that is looking to start building their future based off of some of the younger kids, based off of the recruiting classes. You're going to be looking at Joseph Smith, at DeJohn Hinton, at Xavier Scaroun, to hold on to them, keep them through the weekend, make sure that they're all in on Arizona State, and continue to make the defensive backs room nice, young, talented. Because again, there's just like receiver, there's a lot of transfers that are in the secondary that could decide to leave if they have good seasons. Some guys who may not have any more eligibility. Like you've got Xavier Alford, you got Shamari Simmons, Kamari Wilson. There's LT Welsh at corner, Javen Robinson, Cole Martin. Like there's a chance that a handful of these guys either don't have eligibility or decide to go pro after this year. You need to continue to get younger in the secondary. ASU knows that. They're doing a really good job with that. Along the offensive line, ASU is really starting to put together a strong unit, a deep unit. But like I said, with the secondary, you can never have too many guys, especially first year under Kenny Dillingham. We saw how detrimental it can be to not have enough depth because of injuries or poor play along the offensive line. And they've got a handful of guys that have warm status on them. Offensive tackle, Jermeel Atkins from Dayton, Ohio, a 6'8", 209-pound offensive tackle, has a warm status next to him. Another interior lineman, Peter Lange from San Francisco, California. ASU is really putting emphasis on bringing in the interior linemen, keeping that consistency in the room of getting big, strong kids. Lange could be another guy in that room. Mark Handy, offensive tackle from Albuquerque. There's going to be a chance that they're able to keep him, 6'5", 310 pounds. ASU is going to continue looking to build up their offensive line. This is just a potential group here. All three of those guys have warm status with ASU to be able to get them to commit, hold on to them, all that good stuff. ASU is definitely looking to build the foundation along those positions. There's several other spots here that could end up being really pivotal for ASU. But I feel like between wide receiver, quarterback, probably offensive line would be my top three. Tight end is up there. Michael Turner would be big for the running back position. Edge rusher, like there's more than a few guys here that would be big time gets for ASU. Those are the positions I think would fill the biggest holes for the team. We're going to transition to the last part of the podcast now as we take a look at the players that I think could end up committing this weekend. Keep in mind, I don't have any inside sources. This is shots in the dark, guys that I just feel good about for one reason or another. But we're going to talk about them in just a moment. I'm going to make some bold predictions. We'll see what you guys think. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One more time, wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. A shout out to you guys for making us your first listen of the day, and a special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Wrapping up the podcast now, we're going to talk about a handful of guys that I think could commit this weekend for Arizona State. I do not have a list specifically. I just have a gut feeling for a handful of these guys. The first one, I don't know what it is. I just have a really good feeling about tight end Vander Plug. There's been a lot of smoke here for a minute now. This is a position that ASU seems to really have a good pulse on with Jaden Fortier and AJ Aya. Vanderplug just feels like another dude that Jason Mons should be able to recruit very well, come to the program, and turn tight end into a big-time strength for the team. I don't know if it's this weekend. I think if there was a high-profile guy this weekend to commit, it's Vanderplug. Plug is someone I'm going to be keeping an eye out on. I also mentioned 2 receivers. I mentioned Tavian McNair. I mentioned Gio Richardson. I think one of them commits, if not both of them. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go with Gio Richardson because he is the hometown kid from Basha High School. ASU is really trying to keep the homegrown talent. Gio Richardson just fits that billing. But with Tavian McNair, he's someone that's been pointed out to me. This is someone that also makes a lot of sense. ASU, so he's from Centennial High School out in Corona, California. Centennial has had quite a few kids that Arizona State has recruited from there, including most notably Vontez Burfict. Where there's smoke, there's fire here. I think that there's just a really good chance that if there is an outside player to commit, it's probably a place that ASU has historically gotten some really good players from. Tavian McNair makes a lot of sense. I like him to potentially commit. I also am hoping that ASU could convince Jared Martin from El Centro, California, to commit to the program. Edge rusher, 6'3", 210 pounds. He is the number 32 recruit in California, the number 26 edge rusher. He's a 3-star / 4-star. I don't have any gut feeling here, or I do have a gut feeling. I don't have anything to build it off of necessarily. It's not like there's like a slam dunk piece here, I suppose, that you just kind of look at and you're like, oh yeah, you can connect the dots. Like you can connect the dots for Plug, you can connect it for McNair and for Richardson. Jared Martin, I don't necessarily have one thing that I go, yeah, ASU totally good at recruiting a player like Jared Martin. But I do wonder to myself if there's a strong chance that they could find a way to pull him in. ASU does a good job with California kids. Jared Martin would also be looking at a situation where he could see significant playing time. You have Clayton Smith, who's a beast. He's a monster. A big year, he could turn pro. Prince Dorva, no more eligibility after this year. Elijah O'Neal, I think could have one more year, but I think he's done after this year too. Edge rushing room is going to be wide open. Jared Martin could easily come to this program, slide into a starting role for the team. Last guy I'll mention, we'll go Peter Lange from San Francisco. Archbishop Riordan, I think is how you say that, high school in San Fran. He's the interior lineman, 6'5", 330 pounds. ASU has really done a good job, getting interior guys. Peter Lange fits their narrative. Polynesian Pipeline, big kid. It just feels like a really easy match. Like if I'm playing matchmaker, not basing it off of recruiting prowess or anything. If I'm playing matchmaker, Peter Lange and Arizona State just feel like a really good fit for each other. ASU is just really shown off the ability to recruit the position. They got 4 guys in the interior linemen just from this recruiting cycle, the 2024 recruiting cycle itself, that are coming to Arizona State. Something's in the water out here. I really like Lange. Like I said, playing matchmaker, not basing it off of anything, not kind of like hunch feelings. Lange just feels like an ASU guy. So all in all, I would tell you what I do. 5 guys. We'll say Vanderplug. We'll go Gio Richardson. I'll also go Tavian McNair. I'll say 2 receivers. I will say Peter Lange, and I will be holding out hope for Jared Martin. But either way, that's 4 kids. That's a huge weekend for Arizona State. And there's a ton of other guys here, a ton that could end up winding up at Arizona State. 11 more recruits, 3 4-star kids, tons of guys from in the Valley, tons of Texas guys, tons of California guys. ASU is really good at getting those guys to come here. One more thing I'll leave you with. There's 2 kids coming out of Albuquerque. Mark Handy, offensive tackle from La Cueva, and there was a quarterback, I just had him. Cameron Dyer from La Cueva in Albuquerque. Both of them have the warm label. I think if you get one of them, you get both of them. I don't know if this is the weekend that they do it. But again, I think you get one, you get both. So I'll be keeping my eye out on them. But I do think that there's a potential for 4 guys this weekend. Hopefully you can sneak Jared Martin in. And in a absolute best case scenario, you get the La Cueva kids. Best case scenario, I'm saying 7 kids. I think it's 3. I think it's 4. If I include both receivers, 4. I think the odds are you probably get one or the other. I do think you end up with Vander Plug. I really do. I think that's a very, very realistic possibility for ASU. And between Richardson and McNair, I like the chances for them as well. That's where I think I'll leave off for us. I want to know what you guys think. Are you excited for this recruiting weekend? The answer should be yes. If you're not, then hopefully this podcast will have been the reason for you to get excited. Who are you looking forward to landing? Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrads36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. But wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back again tomorrow. We still have plenty of Sun Devil stuff to talk about, from football to basketball. I got some stuff lined up around the corner here that you guys are definitely going to want to be tuned in for. So again, now's never been a better time to hit that like button, to hit that subscribe button, to hit that follow button. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Till next time, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.